In this video, we'll be exploring Glen Ellyn, DuPage County, Illinois, not for its high-end homes, trending restaurants, or well-tended golf courses, but rather for Native American sites, both historic and prehistoric in nature. We hope that this will be the first of such videos where we investigate Native American sites found in the Chicago region, noted from historical documentation or found via archeological methods. There are literally hundreds of such sites in the Chicago environs, as Native Americans were attracted to this area for the same reasons that Europeans and U.S. settlers were in recent centuries. Ample rivers for fresh water, fishing, and transportation, productive soils, and a mix of prairie, timberland, and marsh for hunting and trapping. Please join us in this pursuit.
A primary guide for this journey will be the Albert Scharf maps, published in 1901 by the Chicago Historical Society, which attempted to document American Indian sites throughout the Chicago region, based on the work of Albert Scharf, an amateur archaeologist and mapmaker. We say attempted to document, as archaeologists now know that Scharf's maps in fact cover much more than the historical period, sometimes going back hundreds or even thousands of years, and that his interpretations of many of the documented sites are often questionable. In the late 1800s, Scharf did not have the tools or methods necessary to distinguish between sites that had been used in the past 100 years versus those that had been used 1,000 years ago, except in those instances where he was able to collect collaborative evidence, often secondhand accounts from witnesses detailing a Native American village site, for example. And his archaeology was then in its infancy, nor did Scharf fully understand how to interpret the sites that he documented, sometimes seeing them through the biased prism of Native American tribes to the far west. Nonetheless, Scharf's maps are a remarkable achievement, as they documented many historic and prehistoric sites in the Chicago regional landscape, before they were erased by modern developments. These Scharf maps, along with collateral information and field notes, are available for inspection at the Chicago History Museum. In the future, we hope to make videos detailing the lives and work of notable regional archaeologists, such as Albert Scharf, Carl Dilg, and George Langford.
In addition to period maps and newspaper articles, for this series we will also make use of a variety of books, such as Chicago Area Archaeology, which includes a series of articles published by the Illinois Archeological Survey, and Indian Villages of the Illinois Country, an extensive work written by Wayne C. Temple and published by the Illinois State Museum. Where possible, we'll utilize local histories as well. For this video in particular, a local history that we'll make use of is the 1928 tome, The Story of an Old Town, Glen Ellyn, by Ada Douglas Harmon. And finally, a special shout-out to Dr. Thomas Loebel of the Illinois Archeological Survey, who patiently answered questions related to our investigations.
And so why the Glen Ellyn area? What attracted Native Americans to this region? First and foremost, just to the east of Glen Ellyn and to the west of Lombard lies the east branch of the DuPage River. And just here, there is a significant bend in the river, taming the water and slowing its path, creating marshes where wildfowl and game abound. Natural springs also bring fresh water to the surface just to the west of the river bend, another lure for indigenous populations. Like many ancient peoples, they may have viewed these springs as being sacred. Today, these springs feed into the idyllic Lake Ellyn to the southwest, where their sacred powers were once used by a health spa and resort more than 100 years ago to cure rheumatism and gout.
But Scharf noted that the area was also a nexus for several ancient Native American trails, passing east-west and north-south. The busy road that we know today as St. Charles Road was first a well-established Native American trail, the most direct route from the mouth of the Chicago River to the Fox River. Just to the east of Glen Ellyn and the east branch of the DuPage River, in Lombard, this ancient trail diverged into three trails, one continuing on west along St. Charles Road, skirting to the north of the DuPage River marshes. The second running south of the marshes, along Crescent Boulevard, then on to Hill Avenue heading southwest towards Batavia along the Fox River. And a third heading due south, approximating Finley Road, eventually bending southeast to the Des Plaines River.
Just 1.5 miles to the west of this juncture of Indian trails, near the center of Glen Ellyn, was yet another crossroads. A north-south indigenous trail from the Lake Zurich area, which then traveled along Salt Creek through Bloomingdale, descending to the point just northeast of Lake Ellyn, where it split into two. One trail heading south along Rifford Road, then eventually to Park Boulevard, leading towards another indigenous village site 5 miles south along the east branch of the DuPage River, then finally bending southwest towards yet another Native American village site in Naperville, this time on the west branch of the DuPage River. The second branch of this crossroads is a more direct route to the Native American village in Naperville, Illinois, approximating Pennsylvania Avenue, then south to Lorraine Street, then southwest to Blanchard Street, eventually joining with Naperville Road heading south.
Scharf contended that these Native American trails joined together an entire network of village sites that were known to exist about 200 years ago along the Fox, DuPage, Salt Creek, Des Plaines, Kankakee, and Chicago River systems. These same trails were later leveraged by U.S. settlers to connect cities and towns built in close proximity to the earlier Native American village sites, forming the basis for the early highways that built this metropolitan area.
One of these major Potawatomi village sites lies within what is today Churchill Woods, part of the DuPage County Forest Preserve District, within Milton Township, an unincorporated area lying between Glen Ellyn and Lombard in DuPage County, Illinois. The village was on the north side of the east branch of the DuPage River, where the river bends east-west, 100 feet or more south of St. Charles Road, extending perhaps 100 yards towards the river and marshes below.
This was a known and historically documented Potawatomi village site, where hundreds of Potawatomi lived while awaiting their removal from Illinois in the 1830s. Thousands of Potawatomi had gathered in village sites like this one, along the DuPage and Des Plaines rivers and Salt Creek during the late 1820s and early 1830s, as the Chicago Indian Agency was to be the launching point for their departure westwards to their new homes in Iowa and Missouri. Here, scores of Potawatomi families and extended families hunted and foraged for food, took their daily meals together, laughed, wept, told stories, sang, and danced. Here they slept uneasy, knowing that they were soon to be transported far to the west, never again to see the place of their ancestors. We hope to document a more complete story of the Potawatomi in a future video.
Early U.S. settlers, such as the Winslow Churchill family, the John Ackerman family, and brothers Ralph and Morgan Babcock, who had purchased nearby properties and whose arrival overlapped with the Native American village sites, were beneficiaries of the American westward expansion and the U.S. policy of Indian removal, enabling them to purchase and develop large tracts of land at the bargain price of $1.25 per acre, or roughly $250 per acre in 2020 money. To be fair, these pioneer families spent enormous amounts of blood, sweat, and tears turning this untamed land into an agricultural ideal, spurring subsequent development and attracting yet more people. Many pioneers were also sympathetic to the Native Americans and lived in relative harmony with them during the early years of U.S. settlement.
Winslow and Mercy Churchill, early settlers, built their cabin and farm just to the east of the east branch of the DuPage River, a short distance north of the Indian Trail, St. Charles Road, when the Potawatomi village still stood to the south of the road. You can see a historical marker for the Churchill home on the northwest corner of St. Charles Road and Swift Road. The Churchill family members recorded that they interacted frequently with the Potawatomi, who were friendly towards them and very curious as to their way of life, their tools, and their implements.
Shortly after the departure of the Potawatomi from their River Bend village site, settler John Ackerman noted that the village site contained many large circles of small, smooth, water-worn rocks, which were used as flooring for the Potawatomi wigwams. These circles were found along the high ground, just to the north and east of the DuPage River.
But even earlier than the Potawatomi village, given the site's beneficial characteristics, it is likely that this site was used numerous times by Native Americans in the preceding millennia for a place of encampment, hunting and fishing, and perhaps even seasonal settlements.
Today, you can still see the site of the former Potawatomi village in a natural setting, at the Churchill Woods Forest Preserve, enshrouded in bur and white oaks, and peppered with black maple trees. A 1-mile gravel pathway leads you through the likely Potawatomi village site, taking you to the serene beauty of the river's edge, where wildfowl nest and feed amidst the rich marshlands. The best way to visit Churchill Woods Forest Preserve is to drive there via automobile, from the east or west along St. Charles Road, where the entrance is located. There are curiously no good ways to visit the preserve by cycling, as there are no walking paths along the busy road. Trust us, we've tried.
Scharf indicates a few additional habitation sites in Glen Ellyn. The first was a little over a half-mile due west of the 1830s Potawatomi village site, on the west side of the east branch of the DuPage River, and just to the west of Rifford Road, roughly between Chittister Avenue and Elm Street. As there is no historical evidence for this site, it likely predates the historical Native American occupation in this area, perhaps by hundreds or even thousands of years. Scharf denotes a second habitation site further south in Glen Ellyn, roughly located just to the north of the intersection of Hill Avenue and Montclair Avenue. Scharf's notes on this site indicate that he believed it to be a stopover point for heading north, south, east, or west, relative to the confluence of trails which met near Glen Ellyn, versus a home village or settlement. Recall that Scharf denoted Hill Avenue as originally being a Native American trail heading southwest out of Glen Ellyn towards Batavia. And so it's not surprising that there may have been a few sites such as this along this former trail. As to when this encampment may have been used is another matter, as there is little corroborating historical evidence for this site, suggesting that its use long predates the Potawatomi.
According to the Scharf map, another site associated with this Hill Avenue trail was that of a chipping station, a little more than a half-mile to the northeast. Again, we have only approximate locations to go on. The reported location of this chipping station was to the north of Hill Avenue, roughly between Whittier Avenue and Country Club Lane. A chipping station is not a place for practicing the chipping of golf balls, but rather it is an archeological site at which the preponderance of artifacts are stone fragments and flakes, which appear to have been the waste or debitage from stone tool chipping, knapping, or manufacturing. Sometimes partially completed projectile points or tools are found, or tools that had been broken in the manufacturing process. Why these specific locations were chosen by Native Americans to manufacture their tools is not always clear, nor is it clear when or for how long these sites were used, whether a single episode or several episodes of flint knapping. What this site does suggest, along with the encampment site to the west, is that the Hill Avenue pathway was in use for a period of time when Native Americans walked these trails.
In fairly close proximity to the Potawatomi village site, Scharf also denotes a signal station across the river, about a quarter of a mile due south of the village. The 1901 Scharf map indicates upwards of 30 such signal stations in the Chicago region, most of which were close by village sites, which on the surface stands to reason. On the other hand, it is difficult to know what to make of these signal stations denoted by Scharf. Etched into our collective consciousness is the notion of Native Americans using a blanket while hunched over a smoky fire burning on a hill, so as to send messages to neighboring settlements. This stereotype came from books, newspaper articles, movies, and television shows, and has become an idea with which we are all familiar.
Although it's true that some Native American tribes did use this method of sending messages, particularly on the Great Plains or in the Southwest, most did not, or there's very little evidence for it. And those that did use smoke signaling typically would set fire to prairie and grasslands, creating a large fire visible for miles, and not bothering to go to a designated signal site for such a task. After all, if you were making a significant fire, a few extra tens of feet in elevation would not make much difference for long-range visibility.
Unless definitive and contemporary eyewitness accounts can be found from either Native Americans or U.S. settlers, it is very difficult to say whether the Potawatomi or any other local tribe made use of these signaling methods. And if they did they bother to use a designated elevated site to do so? It is very possible that Scharf and the local people with whom he spoke to collect this information were heavily influenced by the stories of American Indians coming out of the West and Southwest in the late 1800s. And so they simply assumed that local Native Americans, such as the Potawatomi, naturally used the same method of communication used by some of these far-off tribes. Thus, any significant elevation within proximity of a village site must have been a signal station. To further illustrate this point, a simple search of the term smoke signal in U.S. newspapers from 1700 to 1900 results in very few hits until the 1880s or later. If any Midwestern or Eastern Native American tribes were using some form of smoke signaling or signal fires, there were few or no contemporary reports of it, which is rather remarkable if they were in fact using this novel method.
This is not to suggest that Midwestern and Eastern Native American tribes were not as sophisticated as their Great Plains and Southwestern brethren. The reasons why they may not have used smoke signals may have more to do with simple practicality. Out on the Great Plains or the deserts of the Southwest, where village sites may have been many tens of miles apart, some sort of long-distance signaling may well have been needed to communicate between settlements. However, if villages were more in the order of 5 to 10 miles apart, as they were for the historic Potawatomi in the Chicago region, it may have been far easier to send a runner, a horse rider, or a canoe to the neighboring village, taking tens of minutes and communicating far more information. Only on the rarest of occasions did information need to travel more quickly than that.
However, if this signal station site denoted by Scharf truly did exist, it almost certainly was located along a prominent glacial ridge preserved within Glen Ellyn to this day, close by the Union Pacific Railway line and the Illinois Prairie Path, left behind more than 10,000 years ago with the last of the retreating glaciers. These ancient glaciers acted as a bulldozer and conveyor belt of rocks and gravel, leaving behind large gravel and clay deposits along extensive moraines at the edge of glaciers. In addition, kames, or large melt holes in the glacier, would fill with stone, sand, and debris, and further studded the Glen Ellyn area, with large gravel mounds nearby the moraine when the ice retreated.
Again, without eyewitness testimony or archaeological evidence, it's difficult to pinpoint which of these kame and moraine hillocks between Crescent Boulevard and Ellenwood Drive could have been a Native American signal station, or, much more likely, a habitation site. One candidate may be the end of the road along Clifton Avenue, which rises to more than 730 feet above sea level in elevation. But others further north and west might have a stronger claim, being even higher in elevation. But suffice it to say that if the Potawatomi used smoke signals, which is a big if, then they would have had their pick of high elevations to the south of the DuPage River, from which to send their messages across the 1800s airwaves.
Having seen where the Potawatomi lived, primarily along the DuPage River, and where likely many other Native Americans lived over the past several hundred years, the natural question is, where did they bury and honor their dead? There are at least a few sources on this, although nothing definitive, and so viewers should realize that we can only point out general areas within Glen Ellyn, rather than specific locations.
The first is perhaps the most reliable. Albert Scharf noted that there were a cluster of 6 or 7 mounds or earthworks that he described as burial mounds, more than a half-mile due west of the village site, across the east branch of the DuPage River and a few hundred yards north of the natural mineral springs that flow in this area. Scharf does not appear to have seen these mounds himself, as they had been destroyed by the plow long before 1900. But rather this information seems to have been provided to him by an early settler, perhaps a member of the Ketchum family. The Ackermans, on whose land the mounds were located, were said to have found a large silver brooch in one of these mounds, suggesting that at least some of the burials were in more historic times rather than prehistoric. But as archaeologists have pointed out to us, later burials were fairly common in prehistoric mounds.
Scharf's rough description of the mound site suggests that it was located to the west of Rifford Road and the earlier Native American habitation site in North Glen Ellyn, likely along Park Boulevard between Oak Street and Elm Street. The land rises quickly here from the DuPage River Valley below, forming a shelf or plateau. The very sort of high ground seemed to have been preferred for both burial mounds and effigy mounds along river valleys.
Whether these mounds were truly burial mounds, or possibly effigy mounds, is impossible to say at this late date, as they were long ago destroyed. Scharf doesn't mention whether human remains were removed from these mounds. However, it's probably safe to say that these earthworks were not of great height or size, or in any sort of unusual shape or formation, as they would have been remarked upon by more observers over the course of time, being just a short distance from a much-traveled road, the St. Charles Road to the north.
Today, this location is thoroughly residential in nature, with well-appointed homes and neatly tended yards. Given that the mounds were likely destroyed by 1900, there would have been no trace of their existence when most of these homes were built in the mid to late 1900s.
A second source for a Potawatomi burial ground comes from Ada Harmon's 1928 History of Glen Ellyn. Without citing her source, Harmon indicates that the area along the east side of Main Street, between Maple Street and Hawthorne Street, was a known Potawatomi burial ground. It's certainly possible, but given its distance from any known Potawatomi habitation site, it seems less likely.
We hope that you enjoyed this video and that we gave you some words to ponder along the way. Our goal was to highlight the local landmarks of the indigenous people, the Native Americans, their ancient pathways, their village sites, and how their presence continues to resonate to this day. Thank you for watching, and if you are so inclined, please like, subscribe, share, and comment, and we'll see you, in a manner of speaking, in our next video adventure.